Brian Shaffer walked into a crowded bar at 1:15 in the morning. Two security cameras were pointed at every exit, and somehow he never walked back out. No body, no confirmed sighting, no trace on his phone, his bank account, his credit cards. Just a young medical student who vanished inside a building with cameras on every door, and a case that, 20 years later, still hasn't been solved. Let's see how it all came to this. Brian Randall Shaffer was born on February 25, 1979, in Pickerington, Ohio. Friends described him as easygoing, close with his family, and a little bit of a dreamer. He was obsessed with Pearl Jam, so much so that he had the band's stick figure logo from the single Alive tattooed on his upper arm. He talked about wanting to start a band of his own one day, but the path he was actually on was a serious one. After graduating high school in 1997, he stayed at Ohio State University, and in 2004, he began his studies at the OSU College of Medicine. By the spring of 2006, he was a second-year med student, one exam away from spring break, with a future that looked steady and bright. That spring had already been hard on him. 3 weeks earlier, his mother, Renee, died from myelodysplasia, a rare form of cancer. Brian was grieving, but he was also in a serious relationship. He'd met a fellow OSU student named Alexis Wagoner earlier that year, and there was talk of an engagement. The two of them had a trip to Miami planned, leaving that Monday. On Friday, March 31st, 2006, the semester ended for spring break. Brian had dinner with his father, Randy, at a steakhouse to celebrate. His father noticed he looked exhausted, worn down from cramming for exams all week. Randy didn't think Brian should go out that night with his friend and former roommate Clint Florence, but he never said so out loud. Around 9 p.m., Brian called Alexis, who was visiting her family in Toledo before their trip. He told her he loved her. Then he met Clint at a bar called the Ugly Tuna Saloona in the South Campus Gateway Complex on High Street, just off OSU's campus. The two men bar-hopped through the night, working their way down toward the Arena District and the Short North. Somewhere along the way, Clint called a friend of his, Meredith Reed, who came out to join them. After midnight, Reed gave the two men a ride back to where the night had started, the Ugly Tuna Saloona, for one last round. Security cameras caught all three of them riding the escalator up to the bar's second-floor entrance at 1:15 a.m. Inside, the bar was loud and packed. At some point, Brian and Clint got into an argument. Accounts differ on what it was about, and Brian walked off on his own. Around 1:55 a.m., a camera outside the bar picked him up one more time. He was standing near the entrance, talking casually with two women he'd met that night, Brighton Zatko and Amber Ruick. They talked for a few minutes. He said goodbye, then he turned, walked back toward the bar's entrance, and moved out of frame. That was the last confirmed sighting of Brian Shaffer, ever. The bar closed at 2 a.m. Clint and Meredith waited outside for him, along with the rest of the crowd being cleared out. When he never showed, they assumed he'd already left and headed home without telling them. Alexis and Randy tried calling him that weekend. No answer. On Monday morning, Brian missed his flight to Miami. That's when he was reported missing. Police started where any investigation would, the Ugly Tuna Saloona. Because the Gateway complex sat in an area with a higher crime rate, the building had multiple security cameras covering its entrances. Investigators pulled the footage and found something that didn't add up. They could see Brian go up the escalator with his friends. They could see him outside talking to the two women at 1:55 a.m. What they could not find anywhere was him leaving. At first, investigators wondered if he'd simply slipped past the camera, maybe changed his shirt, put on a hat, kept his head down. So they pulled footage from 3 other nearby bars to see if he showed up on any of those. Nothing. Not a trace. There was another way out of the building, a service door leading to a construction area at the back, a door bar patrons typically didn't use. In the final footage anyone has of Brian, he's standing almost directly in front of that door. Retired Columbus detective John Hurst would later say he noticed what looked like a jump cut in the recording, as if the camera had, for a moment, been overridden by someone, possibly a security guard. Nobody has ever explained why or by whom. Police searched everywhere a person could conceivably end up. They checked dumpsters and waste containers up and down the block. They brought in K9 units. At one point, a dog reportedly tracked a scent to a nearby Wendy's parking lot, though even Detective Hurst admitted he wasn't fully certain it was Brian's scent at all. They got permission from the city of Columbus to search the sewer system beneath campus. Nothing. They checked crawl spaces in the ugly tuna building itself, pulled up panels maintenance workers used to access hidden areas, even searched the roof. Still nothing. At his apartment, 6 blocks from the bar, his car sat untouched in its parking spot. There was no activity on his phone, no charges on his credit cards, no withdrawals from his bank account. A man can't disappear more completely than that, and yet nobody could explain how he disappeared at all. Investigators asked everyone who'd seen Brian that night to take a polygraph test. His father passed. Meredith Reed passed. Clint Florence refused. The 2 women Brian had last been seen talking to were eventually identified and interviewed, though they later said, in 2009, that no one had ever asked them to sit for a polygraph themselves. Detectives interviewed more than 100 people. They floated theory after theory. Maybe, grieving his mother's death, Brian had simply walked away from his old life to be alone with his thoughts. But there was a flight to Miami waiting for him, a girlfriend he'd told he loved just hours earlier, and a medical career he'd spent years building. Alexis never believed it. "I don't think he's alive," she said. "I can't imagine he would have just done that. Maybe he'd gotten trapped somewhere in the building, given the construction happening at the back of it at the time. Maybe something happened to him just outside camera range, in that stretch of a few feet between the last frame anyone has of him and whatever door he might have used to leave. Nobody knows. The case went cold, but it never really went away. Flyers with Brian's photo circulated for years, noting his Pearl Jam tattoo and a distinctive fleck in one of his irises as identifying features. Tips poured in from around the country, and eventually around the world. Reported sightings, half-remembered encounters, amateur theories dissected on forums and podcasts. Every single one was investigated. Not one has ever led anywhere. 20 years on, John Hurst, the detective who worked the case from the beginning, says it's the one that has stayed with him more than any other. He still checks in on it from time to time, still hopes something new will surface. His own theory, after 2 decades, is grim but plain. He believes Brian walked out of that bar into whatever happened to him next, and that it probably ended in foul play. He's writing a book about the case, hoping to clear up some of the misconceptions that have built up around it over the years. Brian's brother Derek marked a recent anniversary of the disappearance with a short statement. There isn't a day that goes by that he doesn't think about his brother. Here's the thing about Brian Shaffer's case that makes it different from most. Usually, in a disappearance like this, there's a gap in the evidence. A stretch of road with no cameras, a wooded area with no witnesses, a home with no security system. This wasn't that. This was a crowded building, cameras on every recorded exit, dozens of witnesses in a packed bar on a Friday night. And somehow, in the middle of all that documentation, a 27-year-old man simply stopped existing on film. No struggle caught on camera. No alarm raised in the moment. Just a young man saying goodbye to two women he'd just met, turning back toward a doorway and vanishing into it. Somewhere between that door and whatever came next, the trail ends. It's ended there for 20 years. Thank you for watching up to this point. If it moved you in some way, please consider leaving a comment. It helps the channel more than you know. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is a good time. There's always another story that deserves to be told properly.